Hi everyone, welcome to Belle's Books. I'm Carly and today I'm going to talk to you about the books that I read in April. I nearly forgot the month then. Okay, so I started off April doing Simon and Tom's book Hibernation, and I was reading The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue, and that was also a carryover from the Irish Readathon, so I finished that at the beginning of April. I was listening to that on audiobook. And I spoke a little bit about this before. So it's set in like a maternity wing of a hospital in Dublin during the First World War, after the First World War, totally forgotten. And we follow nurse Julia Power. Is that her name? Yes, that was her name. And she is looking after pregnant women who have the flu. So I think it was like Spanish flu, and it's quite weird to read about that in the middle of the pandemic anyway. And she's looking after them and their babies when they're born as well. And the thing that I just struggled with it is because I'm very squeamish, and there is a lot of detail about bodily things, and I just found it difficult to read about that kind of stuff. I don't cope well with things about bodies, so that was difficult. But for some reason, I thought I was going to DNF it. I was like, I can't handle this. I can't handle this. But it was so compelling, I think, because I really liked the character. So the character of Julia, and she has like this little helper, this volunteer helper, who comes in just to help her out because they're short-staffed, whose name I have also forgotten. I think it was Bridie. I think her name was Bridie. And she has this friendship with Bridie, and it's just lovely to see the positivity that Bridie brings to her, even though they're in this terrible condition of being in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of war. Everything's terrible. They've not got enough to eat. You know, their tea is basically made of ash. It sounds very gross, but still the positivity that Bridie brings to her is a really nice like a spark to their friendship. And I was just really compelled to carry on reading it, so I really enjoyed that book, which was, I didn't think I was going to, because it was very gross. There was a lot of childbirth, there was a lot of blood and gross things, and poo and wee and all that kind of stuff. So if you're squeamish like me, be careful of that one. But other than that, I would really recommend the story. It was kind of a slow-paced book, and you know, not much happens, but there was one character which was drawn from history about it. So there was this female doctor. It was one of the like first female doctors, and she was also a political activist. I think she was like she was in the IRA, and her name was Kathleen Lynn, and I found that really interesting, and I would quite like to know more about her in real life. So that was good. I enjoyed that book very much, and want to read more by Emma Donoghue. Then for Hibernation, let me change my cup hand. I read Cheerful Weather for the Wedding, which was the group read by Julia Strachey, and this is a Persephone classic. I did the cover replica challenge. I'll insert my photo here. I was quite pleased with this, actually. And this was a book I knew nothing about. It's very thin, so it didn't take me like a day to read. And it's about the bustle around a wedding. It's about people preparing for this wedding. And I thought it was going to be quite silly and humorous. And it was it's kind of it's dated. This was written in 1932, and the language and the tone of it is very old-fashioned. So there's just these people getting ready for this wedding, and that was nice and fine and easy to read. And I thought that was all it was going to be. It felt a little bit like Mrs. Dalloway, where you're just reading about one day. Everyone's getting ready for this particular event. There's a couple of brothers that are winding each other up. There's a bunch of family that have arrived. The mother is seemingly suffering from dementia, and you know that something is going to come of that because she's putting all of the guests in the same bedroom. So you know there's going to be some fallout from that. And the bride is secretly drinking and keeping a bottle up her arm. We're like, wait a minute, something's going on. Why is she not so happy about getting married? Anyway, at the end, I won't spoil it, but at the end there is a bit of a turn. I think that's what Simon and Tom said. A bit of a turn at the end, which I wasn't anticipating, and it kind of shocked me. I was like, what? I was not expecting this. So I felt like by the end of the novel it had a real depth to it, that kind of made you look back on the rest of the book and have a new appreciation for it. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to remember this, you know, months down the line, but it was an enjoyable read and I liked it very much, and we'll look out for more Persephone classics. I am reading a Persephone classic this month. I'm reading The Diary of Catherine Mansfield, so would like to get to more of these. Okay, then for something totally different, I read 2 books about motherhood that were difficult. I think that's my food. We've ordered Thai food tonight. I think it's just been delivered. Is that our dinner?
Yes.
Okay. I'll come back after I've eaten my dinner. I'm back from my dins, which you can tell because I've eaten all of my lipstick off and I can't be bothered to put it back on, so I'm not gonna. You know when you order takeaway and then it's kind of disappointing? That just happened because Dan was gonna make fake chicken wraps tonight. He is excellent at making wraps. And then he started watching the Food Network, and he was watching those 2, what are they called? Oh, the hairy bikers. He was watching them and they were doing a tour round like Thailand and I don't know, all these places. And so he got it into his head that he wanted either Chinese food or Thai food. They were making dumplings and there was a lot of noodles. So he was like, I want Chinese. Now, we live in a town which has terrible choice of takeaways. They're all rubbish. And we decided to get one anyway. So we got a Thai and it was disappointing. So, sad times. Anyway, you don't want to hear about my dinner. Let's move on. So before I disappeared, I was telling you about the books I read that were to do with motherhood. And I read Patsy by Nicole Dennis-Benn. This is a bit of a chunk of a novel, and I read this for my In Real Life book club, and I thought it was fantastic. I was so engaged in this book. I was turning the pages as quick as I could. So this book is about Patsy, who is a Jamaican woman who wants to go to America to live the dream. Also, she is in love with her best friend Cicely, who has moved out to New York, and she wants to go and follow her. The thing is, Patsy has a 5-year-old daughter that she leaves behind in Jamaica with the daughter's father. So Patsy has been living with her daughter and her mother and kind of struggling to make ends meet. She's got an office job, which seemed to be like a decent job. But anyway, so she's been trying to get a visa to get to America to be with her best friend Cicely again. And she's got it into her head that once that happens, everything's going to be golden. And at the beginning, when she leaves, she gets the visa, and when she leaves, oh my God, it was heartbreaking because you hear there's 2 narratives. There's Patsy's and there's her daughter True. So you hear it from both perspectives. And I haven't seen many reviews of this apart from Sarah over at Hardcover Hearts. And I know that she did a big review of this. And I think it warrants it because there's so much to talk about in this book. There's a lot of big themes in here. The characters are so complex and nuanced, and that's what I loved about this book, is that apparently there was some backlash against Patsy because she's like, oh, she's a terrible mother, she leaves her child. And it is heartbreaking when she leaves True, because you hear from True's perspective that she's pining for her mother and she thinks her mother is going to come back, but Patsy never has any intention of going back. And that is just really difficult to read. And I don't know, I kind of connected with it on a bit of a personal level. My mother didn't leave me, but when I was younger, I used to have to spend a certain amount of time with my dad. So I had to go to my dad's house for weekends, and that was court mandated. And I remember when I was a kid, I was very much a mummy's girl, and I hated being away from my mum. It was only for a weekend. But I remember that feeling of being wrenched apart from someone that you want to be with. And that really hit with me, the way that True's voice came through in this book. And oh, it was just so difficult. I just felt awful. I was like, oh my God, this poor little girl. And then as she's growing up, she still thinks her mother is going to come back. And there's a whole period of like 10 years where Patsy just does not speak to her child. She doesn't write, she phones once and then hangs up. And it's just, it's so heartbreaking. But I didn't feel like Patsy was a bad person. I felt like, yeah, she made some bad choices and she could have done things better. But I felt for both of them. I felt for Patsy because she, as a queer woman who is wanting to make a life with a woman that she loves, wants to escape from the homophobic culture that is where she grew up in this village in Jamaica. And that, like, this is what I was saying about the characters being so nuanced. It's not just this is one person, she is a bad mother. It's not that. She's made some difficult choices, and as the narrative goes on, even if you think, well, she's a bad mother, which I didn't, I know some people did, you learn so much about her as you kind of get flashbacks and a bit of context, that by the end of the novel you understand why she's the person that she is and how she's turned out like that. Also, I think that it's very important to have narratives like this that don't position motherhood as an innate, natural feeling and a way of acting, because some women don't want to have children and some women don't feel that connection to their child, and that's just how it is. It doesn't make you a bad person, and I think that is something that really needs to be explored more, and this is a very good way of doing it. And that's what really came across strongly for me in this novel, is that Patsy has been through so much trauma in her life. Trigger warnings in this book for child abuse, rape, racism, misogyny, domestic abuse, a lot of things. There's a lot of hard stuff in this novel, right? It's dark. But on the flip side, there is also a lot of tenderness and joy and connection. So when Patsy forms a relationship with this woman in America, that again just melts your heart, because you just feel like, oh, she's had it rough for such a long time, and finally she's found love and she's got this connection, and that's really lovely. Similarly with her daughter True, again, trigger warning for self-harm. She, again, because of her mother's actions and her mother's decisions, that shapes who she is in a kind of a negative way, because she looks back on herself and is like, what's wrong with me? Why does my mother not love me? And it's heartbreaking, and you can see how that then causes her to do her self-harm, and it's just so difficult. But I would recommend this book because I'm not going to give any spoilers, but it kind of resolves itself at the end, and it is not a bad ending. It is a good ending. So by the time I finished this, I was so invested in all of these characters. Even True's father, Roy, who seems quite stern, first of all. And when True first moves in with him and his wife, Marva, again, each character is just so complex and has so much nuance. That's what I really loved about this. I could talk about all these different characters and the way that I thought they were so well drawn, and I just want everyone to read this book. It's just wonderful. It is wonderful. And if you can deal with the dark stuff and the triggering stuff, then do read it, because I think there should definitely be more narratives about motherhood and the way that culture expects mothers to be and behave and act, and what, you know, it's just, there's lots of different people in the world and they react differently to different things, and we shouldn't all expect everyone to be the same kind of mother. We shouldn't expect everyone to feel the same and have that immediate connection with their child. It doesn't happen all the time, and that needs to be talked about more. Yes, would highly recommend this. In the same vein, on the same topic, I read Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi, because this was the Women's Prize, on the Women's Prize long list. And again, I am interested in difficult relationships between parents and children, and this again was that. Another dark read, another complex relationship between mother and daughter in a completely different way. So we are looking at the story of Antara, and it's told in first person from her perspective, but it does flash back to her childhood. Her mother was not a good mother. Again, she didn't look after her properly. She took her away from her father, and they lived in an ashram where she just kind of relinquished responsibility for her and let someone else basically look after her. And there's no, the thing that I found really difficult to read in here, that maybe was a little bit different from Patsy, is that Antara and her mother Tara, they have very similar names, are together a lot, but there's no affection, there's no or very little instances of physical closeness and expressions of love, and that is difficult to read. But again, it happens. It's necessary to talk about it. And again, I know that people struggled with this book and found the protagonist and the narrator cold and detached, but for me that was the point, because she's had no form of consistent love and affection and affirmation of who she is. Her mother was always rejecting her, and like her mother says some awful shit to her. Like there's some instances where she just says really nasty things or pushes her away, and like when she's a child, a 5-year-old child in this ashram, and she wants her mother, and her mother's just like totally obsessed with this dude, this guru dude, and has no time for her child. And that's really hard to read. It's really difficult, and that obviously impacts on Antara, and then the way that again she views herself, and her coping mechanism, or for me, I read it as her coping mechanism, is to be self-sufficient, be an interior or insular person, and that you look after yourself, and that you have no connection to other people that is gonna harm you then, because her mother was the person that harmed her the most, and then that completely affected the way that she was with other people and the way that she reflected on herself. I'm speaking so fast. I need to guzzle some juice. I have a lot of thoughts about this. I've only just finished this book. I finished it last night, and I thought it was really good. There were some problems I had, okay? Again, trigger warning. Trigger warning. There's a mention of the rape of a child in here, which is disgusting and unnecessary. I felt like it was in there for shock value. It didn't add anything to the story. It was unnecessary. Also, there's a line in here where Tara is talking about her father, and she references maybe I should sleep with my father or something like that. And it's, again, that completely threw me off the narrative, because I thought that feels unrealistic. I feel like she wouldn't really have said that. What is the point in putting that in? It feels like you're just doing it for shock value. It didn't sit well within the narrative. I don't know why that was in there. So there was a couple of really weird instances like that, and it just threw me off a little bit. But I think what this book does very well is open up a discussion for the way that we internalise trauma, the way that we respond to other people's, particularly our parents, decisions, actions, and how that informs us as a person. And this book looks at memory, because Antara is trying to get her mother, who has dementia, to remember all these terrible things that she's done to her as a child. But then there's instances where her mother goes, actually, or tells her something that she didn't know, or she'd forgotten, or she'd misremembered. And you as a reader don't know who's telling the truth, because her mother has dementia, but she is clearly very scarred and traumatized by what her mother has done to her. And it makes you think about memory and the way that we reflect on memories, the way that memories change as we age. And I know I do this because I've got memories that I know I have absolutely made up because they're part of stories that you either tell yourself or you tell other people. And I just find that fascinating. It blows my mind when I start thinking about that kind of stuff. And I think this was a really good kind of philosophical look at memory and that kind of stuff. I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I know it's not for everybody. The writing style as well, and also it gets a bit towards the end that it feels like a book of two halves. So the first part, where we're switching between the immediate present of Antara looking after her mother, and her mother getting more and more unstable and not able to look after herself, and the difficulties between Antara and her husband Dilip's marriage, because he's like, oh, do you really want your mother to live with us, because you guys don't get along, and how is that going to work? And that was really compelling. And then it got to a point just after halfway through where we're looking back at memories, and Antara's remembering this dude that her mother started to sleep with and who lived with them. And I just kind of then lost it a little bit. I wasn't so engaged with it. But there's also a commentary on art as a representation of your mental state, because Antara's an artist and she's making these drawings of the same face over and over again, and every day she draws the same face, but because she's replicating it, it changes and changes. And I thought that was a really interesting concept, and just like commentary on the way that art as a career is perceived, particularly for a woman, and yeah, expectations of motherhood and the way that women can become invisible once they've had a baby, and the expectations that are placed upon them to act a certain way, to be this kind of mother where it's all encompassing. The baby is now your life, and that's it, and you should sacrifice everything for them. And I think there's a bit of postnatal depression in there, because she does seem to go off the rails. But again, you don't know whether that's because she's suffering from undiagnosed postnatal depression, or the trauma of like everything that her mother did to her is then reflecting, is she going to do that to her baby? Because she has then intrusive thoughts about what she wants to do to her baby, which is cause it harm. So again, another dark read. But if you feel like you can pick it up, I would recommend this. I think it's fascinating, and I think it's very thought-provoking, and it does make you think about lots of things. Okay, I've waffled on mostly about my food and stuff, so I'm going to end it here. I hope you're all doing very well. I don't even know what my next video is going to be. But today is Beltane, 1st of May. It is also World Naked Gardening Day. yes, I did participate. I was working today in the library. So I rushed home and I had an Instagram message from the World Naked Gardening Day people. And they said, are you going to participate again this year? I was like, I'm at work, but all right, I'll try and do it when I get home. I did it. I got naked and got in my potting shed and got Dan to take a picture of me with my tomato plants covering my boobs. So that was fun. Anyway, I'm gonna go. I will speak to you very soon in another video. Take care, everybody. Bye.